Hermetics. Franz Bardon, the Magician. Lesson 9. The soul, the astral body, and the astral plane. Deep reading about the soul as the real human being. Bardon opens this chapter with a declaration so compressed it takes a moment to fully land. The soul, he says, is the real man. Not the body, not the intellect, not even the spirit, at least not yet in the sequence. The soul, the astral body, the vehicle of feeling, of temperament, of character, of desire, of memory in its living form. What you experience as yourself from moment to moment, the continuous emotional experiential stream of being alive, that is the soul. Everything else is either its container or its operator. This chapter is the most personally confronting in the entire theoretical section. The previous lessons described cosmological architecture, elemental laws, karmic mechanics. This lesson describes you, your character, your temperament, your automatic patterns, your visible radiation. It points at what you actually are as an experiencing being, beneath the stories you tell about yourself. It asks you to look at your own elemental composition with the same precision Bardon applies to everything else. For most students, this is where the theory becomes uncomfortably real. 1. The real man, why the soul and not the body or the spirit? Bardon could have called the spirit the real man. It is immortal, causal, the source of will. He could have called the body the real man. It is the tangible, persistent, sensory instrument. He chose neither. He chose the soul. The logic is precise. The body is a vehicle. It is built, maintained, aged, and eventually dissolved. It is the instrument, not the musician. The spirit is the immortal operator, but without the soul as intermediary, the spirit cannot act in the world, cannot feel, cannot register experience, cannot develop. The soul is the seat of everything the spirit has accumulated across incarnations, every quality, every virtue, every weakness, every temperamental tendency. It is where the spirit's development is stored as living character. This is why the soul is the real man, because when you meet another person, what you actually encounter is their soul. Not their body. Bodies are interchangeable, largely similar. Not their abstract spirit. That is inaccessible to direct perception. You meet their character, their emotional quality, their way of being present. You meet their fire or their water, their earthiness or their lightness. You meet the accumulated elemental composition that their immortal spirit has built through all of its experiences. The soul is the signature of the spirit's entire journey. 2. Through finer vibrations of the elements, the soul as elemental refinement. Bardon describes how the soul came into being through finer vibrations of the elements, through the electric and magnetic fluid of their polarity. The real man, the soul, has emerged from the Akashic principle. The key word is finer. The body arose from the elements at their densest vibration rate, slow enough to solidify into matter. The soul arose from the same elements at a higher vibration rate, fast enough to be non-material, but still structured, still composed, still subject to the same elemental laws. The elements do not change between the body and the soul. Only their density changes. This has a radical practical implication. Everything true of the elements in the body is equally true of the elements in the soul, with the appropriate adjustment for density. Fire builds in the body and builds in the soul. Water dissolves in the body and dissolves in the soul. Air balances in the body and balances in the soul. Earth coheres in the body and coheres in the soul. The same four-pole magnet. The same tetragrammaton. The same laws operating at a higher frequency. And just as the body has its electromagnetic fluid, the OD radiating outward from the body's elemental activity, the soul has its electromagnetic fluid. Bardon calls this the astral matrix. And here he makes one of the most important distinctions in the entire theoretical section. The astral matrix is not the aura. These are completely different things, routinely confused by those outside the tradition. 3. The astral matrix versus the aura, the most important distinction in this chapter. Bardon is explicit and emphatic on this point because the confusion between astral matrix and aura leads to fundamental errors in both theoretical understanding and practical work. The astral matrix is the electromagnetic binding agent between the physical body and the soul. It is structural, functional, and invisible in the ordinary sense. It is not perceived as light or color by the untrained person. It is the interface, the mechanism by which the astral body is held in relationship to the physical body, receiving impressions from the physical senses and transmitting the spirit's influence back down into the body. Without the astral matrix, body and soul separate. Separation of the astral matrix from the physical body is what Bardon means by death. Reconnection of the astral matrix to a dead body, the extraordinary power he assigns to the Kabbalistic letter F, is what initiates of all ages have called resurrection. The aura is something completely different. It is the radiation of the soul's elemental activity, the outward emanation produced by the combined operation of all four temperamental elements in the astral body. It is visible to the trained clairvoyant as color, light, and movement. Its colors, intensity, and patterns directly reflect the soul's current elemental state, which elements are dominant, which are in positive or negative polarity, where there is harmony and where there is disturbance. The distinction in practical terms: the astral matrix is a structural constant. It is always present as long as body and soul are united. The aura is a dynamic expression. It changes with every significant shift in the soul's elemental composition. A person in a rage has a different aura than the same person at peace. The astral matrix does not change between these states. The astral matrix is the instrument. The aura is the music the instrument is currently playing. The halo around the heads of saints and initiates in every religious tradition is not artistic convention. It is the accurate perception of an extraordinarily powerful and pure aura, the radiation of a soul whose elemental composition has been purified, balanced, and elevated through genuine development over many incarnations. The halo is a clairvoyant fact, not a symbol. Bardon says so directly, and every genuine tradition confirms it. 4. The four temperaments, your elemental signature made visible. Here Bardon reaches the most personally applicable material in the chapter, the four temperaments as direct expressions of elemental dominance in the soul. This is not a typology system invented for psychological categorization. It is the direct visible expression of which element is operating most powerfully in a given soul, and which polarity, active or passive, that element is currently in. The choleric temperament arises from the fire element. In its active, positive polarity it produces activity, enthusiasm, zeal, determination, boldness, courage, creativity, ambition. These are fire's electric fluid in productive expression, the expansive, initiating, building quality of fire directed toward worthy ends. In its passive, negative polarity the same fire produces gluttony, jealousy, irritability, quarrelsomeness, intemperance, destructiveness. The choleric is not a different person in positive and negative polarity. It is the same fire, the same intensity, the same force, directed by will toward creation or allowed to run reactively toward destruction. The sanguine temperament arises from the air element. In its active polarity, penetrating intellect, diligence, joy, agility, kindness, clarity, optimism, independence, alertness, trustworthiness. These are airs equilibrating, mediating, light-carrying quality in full productive expression. In its negative polarity, being easily offended, gossiping, lack of perseverance, cunning, dishonesty, changeability. The sanguine's failure mode is precisely air's weakness when ungrounded, too light, too easily shifted, unable to sustain direction long enough to produce lasting results. The melancholic temperament arises from the water element. In its active polarity, respect, mercy, modesty, devotion, seriousness, fervor, intimacy, comprehension, meditation, compassion, calmness, internalization, forgiveness, tenderness. These are the magnetic fluid's receptive, deep, holding quality in its highest expression. The melancholic at their best is the container of depth, the person in whose presence you feel truly heard, truly met, truly accompanied. In their negative polarity, indifference, dejection, shyness, apathy, inertia, the water element contracted too far inward, holding so tightly it stops flowing altogether. The phlegmatic temperament arises from the earth element. In its active polarity, perseverance, thoughtfulness, determination, firmness, conscientiousness, thoroughness, concentration, sobriety, punctuality, objectivity, sense of responsibility, reliability, caution, resilience, sense of purpose. These are Earth's cohesive, enduring, structural quality operating at full capacity. The phlegmatic at their best is the foundation, the person you can absolutely count on, who will still be there doing the work when everyone else has moved on. In their negative polarity, blandness, negligence, indifference, tardiness, sluggishness, indolence, taciturnity. Earth that has stopped cohering and begun to merely sit. Now the critical insight Bardon does not spell out, but which follows directly from the elemental system. No one has only one temperament. Every human soul contains all four elements. The question is proportion and polarity. The predominant element determines the primary temperament, but the other three are always present in secondary ratios. This is why character is infinitely more complex than any simple typology captures. You are a specific recipe of fire, water, air, and earth in specific proportions, each in its own positive or negative polarity, all interacting continuously. Your character is your elemental signature. Unique, precise, and completely legible to anyone with trained elemental perception. 5. The seat of all the qualities the spirit has the soul as the spirit's display. Bardon makes a statement that deserves full attention. The astral body is therefore the seat of all the qualities which the immortal spirit has. The spirit is immortal, causal, operating from the mental plane. But you cannot directly observe another person's spirit. It is non-material, non-visible, accessible only to the most highly developed clairvoyant perception. What you can observe, and what every person constantly broadcasts whether they intend to or not, is their soul, their astral body, their elemental composition in its current state. This means the soul is simultaneously the spirit's instrument and its report card. The spirit acts through the soul. But the soul also reflects the accumulated quality of the spirit's development across incarnations. A spirit that has cultivated fire qualities across many lifetimes arrives in a new incarnation with a naturally strong choleric positive soul composition. A spirit that has cultivated water qualities arrives with a strong melancholic positive composition. The temperament you were born with is not random. It is the precipitation of your spirit's entire developmental history into this lifetime's starting configuration. And the further implication, your temperamental weaknesses, the negative pole of your dominant element, are precisely the areas where your spirit's development is incomplete. The choleric who erupts in irritability is showing where their fire remains unmastered. The melancholic who collapses into apathy is showing where their water has stagnated. The soul is the spirit's unfinished work made visible. Every character flaw is an elemental imbalance calling for conscious correction. And every character strength is an elemental mastery that the spirit has genuinely achieved. 6. Consciousness and subconscious, the two poles of soul awareness. Bardon locates two centers of awareness in the brain that correspond directly to the soul's dual polarity. The cerebrum is the seat of normal consciousness, and the cerebellum is the seat of the subconscious. which he explicitly identifies as the opposite of normal consciousness. This is a precise elemental statement, not merely a psychological one. The cerebrum, the front and upper brain, is the fire/electric center of the head, the active, projective, analytical pole of awareness. The cerebellum, the rear and lower brain, is the water/magnetic center, the receptive, containing, reactive pole of awareness. Normal consciousness is the electric pole of awareness. The subconscious is the magnetic pole of awareness. The practical consequence is immediately recognizable. The subconscious holds and radiates outward everything the conscious mind has pushed inward. What you suppress consciously accumulates magnetically in the subconscious and eventually expresses outward in dreams, in automatic reactions, in the patterns that repeat in your life despite your conscious intention to change them. This is not a metaphor. It is the water principle's magnetic accumulation and retention function operating in the soul rather than the body. Bardon goes further in the IH. He says the subconscious can be treated as an opponent, not an enemy, but a counterforce whose mechanical operation resists conscious intention unless consciously trained. Every successful autosuggestion practice, every genuine habit change, every sustained transformation of character is the process of bringing the subconscious into alignment with the conscious will, which is precisely the process of harmonizing the magnetic pole of awareness with the electric pole. Psychological integration is elemental integration. 7. The elemental centers, Bardon's confirmation of the chakra system. Here Bardon does something significant. He openly confirms the Indian chakra system as a genuine map of the soul's elemental centers, while declining to elaborate on it in detail, pointing the student toward the existing literature. This is not laziness. It is Bardon acknowledging that another tradition has already mapped this territory accurately, and there is no need to duplicate the work. The mapping he gives is exact and worth stating clearly. The Muladhara at the base of the spine is the earth center, the seat of physical grounding, structural survival, the most condensed elemental force in the soul. The Swadhisthana in the region of the sexual organs is the water center, the seat of vital magnetism, generative force, the creative receptive principle at its most physically immediate. The Manipura at the navel is the fire center, the seat of personal will, digestive fire, the power of the individual self to assert and transform. The Anahata at the heart is the air center, the seat of the balancing, mediating principle in the soul, the place where the lower elemental forces meet the higher, where instinct begins to become conscious love. The Vishuddha at the throat is the Akashic center, the seat of creative expression, the point where inner causal reality expresses outward as sound, word, and vibration. The Ajna between the eyebrows is the center of will and intellect, the command center of the developed magician, the seat of trained clairvoyance. And the Sahasrara at the crown is the thousand-petaled lotus, the highest center from which all other forces of all centers emanate and through which they are ultimately governed. The Sushumna, the central channel running along the spine from Sahasrara to Muladhara, is the Akashic pathway connecting all centers. It is the vertical axis of the soul, the channel through which the Akashic principle regulates the relationship between all elemental centers. Bardon says explicitly, the Sushumna is the Akashic principle in its spinal expression. The spine is Akasha made anatomical. It is why every meditation tradition across every culture eventually focuses on the uprightness of the spine. The posture is the Akashic axis made conscious. The awakening of what Indian tradition calls the Kundalini, the serpent power rising from Muladhara through each center to Sahasrara, is in Bardon's terms the progressive activation of each elemental center in the soul from its densest, earth, to its most refined, Akashic, until the entire soul vibrates at the full frequency of the Akashic principle. This is precisely what IH steps 1 through 10 are producing, whether Bardon names it that way or not. The path of initiation is Kundalini Yoga by another name, with a different pedagogical approach. 8. The astral plane, the soul's home world. Bardon then opens an entirely separate and remarkable section on the astral plane itself, the world that corresponds to the soul the way the gross material plane corresponds to the body. The astral plane, he says, was not created from the 4 elements. This stops most readers because everything else in the system has elemental origins. But the astral plane is different in kind. It is a degree of density of the Akashic principle itself. Not an elemental creation, but an Akashic expression. It is the plane in which Akasha operates at a density high enough to contain structure and experience, but low enough to remain free of the solidification that defines the material world. This explains several things that otherwise seem mysterious. The astral plane is timeless and spaceless because it is Akashic in nature, and Akasha precedes and transcends the space-time framework that Earth's solidification created. On the astral plane, past, present, and future are simultaneously accessible, not because the future is predetermined, but because from outside the Earth-created time framework, all moments of the temporal sequence are equally present causal realities. The astral plane is the sphere of vibrations in which light, sound, color, rhythm, and all life in all created things have their origin. This is a staggering claim. It means that the light you perceive physically is a condensed expression of astral light. The sound you hear physically is a condensed expression of astral vibration. Every quality of sensory experience, color, tone, texture, rhythm, originates in the astral plane and descends into physical density through the elemental condensation process. The physical world is the astral plane with its vibrations slowed into matter. The practical consequence for the trained magician is exact. To work on the astral plane is to work at the origin of physical phenomena, which is why astral interventions produce physical results. The magician who changes something in the astral template of a situation has changed its causal foundation. The material expression of that situation will follow, because the material is downstream of the astral, which is downstream of the mental, which is downstream of Akasha. Working from higher planes toward lower ones is always more efficient and more permanent than working only at the physical level. This is the Hermetic basis of all genuine magic. 9. The emanation of the eternal, the Akashic record in the astral plane. Bardon's most profound statement about the astral plane: one therefore sees in the astral plane the emanation of the eternal, which has neither beginning nor end, and is therefore timeless and spaceless. The initiate who finds his way in this plane can find everything here, whether it is past, present, or future. Because the astral plane is a density of Akasha, and Akasha is the sphere of all causes, the complete registry of every cause ever set in motion, the astral plane is also the living mirror of all that has been, is, and will be. Not a static record, but a living presence. Every cause registered in Akasha is present in the astral plane as an active pattern. The initiate who accesses the astral plane with sufficient clarity and development can read these patterns directly. This is what genuine clairvoyance is. Not imagination. Not psychological projection. Not guesswork. It is the direct perception of Akashic causal patterns as they exist in the astral plane, patterns that include what has already fully manifested, the past, what is currently manifesting, the present, and what is causally inevitable from already registered causes, the future. The scope of what can be perceived depends directly on the degree of the initiate's development. A beginner may perceive fragments. An advanced initiate may perceive the complete causal pattern of an entire situation, including its past origin and future trajectory. Your own knowing moments, those times when you simply knew something without reasoning, without evidence, with total certainty that proved accurate, are moments when your soul made direct contact with the astral plane's Akashic content. The man in the indigo coat whose future role in your life you recognized before seeing his face, Your soul perceived an akashic causal pattern already registered in the astral plane and transmitted that recognition to your consciousness as absolute, unquestionable knowing. Those moments are not anomalies. They are brief clearings of the elemental noise that normally prevents the soul from accessing what is always there. The core synthesis, you are three things simultaneously. By the end of this chapter, Bardon has given you the complete three-body map of the human being. The body is the earth plane instrument, the densest expression of your elemental composition, built and maintained by the four-pole magnet, subject to growth and aging under the earth principle, the vehicle through which the soul perceives and acts in the material world. The soul is the astral plane instrument, the real man, the seat of character and temperament, the repository of the spirit's accumulated development, the place where feeling, desire, memory, and the four temperaments live. It is held to the body by the astral matrix and radiates its elemental state outward as the aura. It is your native environment in the astral plane and will continue in that plane after the physical body's dissolution. The spirit is the mental plane operator, the immortal principle, the will that initiates, the intelligence that discerns, the conscience that perceives alignment with Akasha. It works through the soul, cannot manifest without the soul's mediation, and gives the soul its purpose and direction. Without the spirit's activity in the soul, the astral body would dissolve into its constituent elemental parts. You are simultaneously a body, a soul, and a spirit, operating on three planes at once, subject to the elemental laws on each plane, connected by the astral matrix and the mental matrix in an unbroken vertical chain from the physical through the astral to the mental. This is not a philosophical model. It is a structural description of your actual constitution as a being, operating continuously whether you are aware of it or not. The initiate's work is to become fully conscious of all three levels simultaneously, to know in real time what the body's elemental state is, what the soul's elemental composition is producing in terms of temperament and aura, and what the spirit's will is directing. When all three are aligned, when the body's elemental health supports rather than distracts from the soul's clarity, and the soul's clarity expresses rather than distorts the spirit's will, the magician is operating as a single integrated instrument. Nothing is working against anything else. Everything is working together. That integration, body, soul, and spirit in conscious, voluntary alignment, is what Bardon means by magical equilibrium. It is not a static state of perfect balance. It is a living, dynamic, continuously maintained alignment of three simultaneously active planes of being. It is the most demanding thing a human being can attempt. And it is what every step of the IH is progressively building toward. The magician of the first tarot card is the being in whom body, soul, and spirit are one coherent, conscious, sovereign instrument. That is the goal. And this chapter is the first time you can see exactly what that means in structural terms.